Hello everyone and welcome to the Sweeney Show, Business and Law Podcast. I'm David Sweeney. Joining me here today is Eoin Joyce, solicitor and immigration expert. Eoin, you're very welcome.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Eoin, how are things? How are you surviving through COVID-19?
You know, it's a tough question. We're going well, to be honest. I mean, we've got myself and 3 staff on here still, and we're doing what we can. We've a fair old backlog to get through, so that's going to take us on for a few more weeks. And there's obviously less business coming through the door because, well, number one, because the door is closed, but just doing things virtually, etc., isn't breeding the same number of clients. But we're getting through it fine, David. But I suppose we need to just keep trying our best. That's all we can do.
And you have a general practice law office in Cork and Limerick city centres, is it?
Yeah, correct. So our office in Cork, which is our head office, is in Washington Street West, down the other side of Washington Street from the Grand Parade, and that's been running since 1982. We have a sub-office in Limerick running since last summer. So We're in the Limerick City Centre as well in Bedford Row.
Very good. And is it a family business? Did your dad set it up?
It is. My father moved down from Mayo when he was, well, I suppose he moved down in the 70s, worked for a couple of years in different firm in the city. He started his own practice in 1982. That's how the practice started. I joined the practice in 2010.
Okay.
Which is quite a while back now.
And your own legal training, is your undergraduate, did you go to college with a law degree or did you take another pathway?
No, I don't have a law degree. When I finished school, I actually never, I didn't put law down on the CAO actually. So I did commerce in UCC, and I did 4 years of that. I specialised in marketing for my final 2 years. And what I did then was in 2008 when I graduated, I just wanted to travel a bit, so I travelled. I moved to France, in the south of France, Montpellier, and I lived there for 2 years. I worked as a barman.
Lovely.
Then, in terms of my law progression, I came back here in 2010 to Cork, and I started doing the FE1s, the entrance exams, we say, for the apprenticeship stage. I'd done all 8 of them by 2011, and then I joined the course in Dublin, Blackhall Place, in 2012. So I did six months up there after that.
Very good.
From 2012-13.
And you have a general practice law office which covers a wide variety of legal services, but you specialise in immigration yourself, do you? Yeah,
I do. I started doing immigration, I think 2013 was my first case. Thinking back, it was what's called a family reunification case. So a person had come to me who had tried to bring their family to the country and had been refused by the Irish embassy of their country. They brought me their letter, and I looked at it and said, well, okay, I'll look into this. We had 2 months to appeal it. We appealed it. Very, very time heavy, very detailed. We got as much documents as we could. I threw the kitchen sink at it, David, I suppose. But I found that I really enjoyed it, and ultimately we got the appeal over the line.
Very good.
Which was great, and the family moved over to Ireland, and they're still here. They're still here, which is great, and that's what kickstarted me. I started getting into a few things like that. Immigration is very broad. There's lots of other aspects to it apart from family reunification. So I started one by one. I started getting into each of the areas, and before we knew it, it was a huge area for us. Yeah, in the practice.
And what do you say to anyone setting out an immigration question in Ireland? What's the first port of call? What should they do?
Well, what I found over the years with people is it's an area that's actually not known enough about, and until you've done it for the 7 years that I've done on that level, you don't know enough to fully advise someone. Thankfully, the last couple of years we're in a position where we've seen things play over and over again. We've seen how, I suppose, questions people get from the department, how they have to deal with it, etc. What I say to someone if they're stuck or if they're not sure what to do, book a consultation. And the reason we're saying that it's not just, I mean, obviously we say the business, etc. But what I say to people, the reason why you should book a consultation, go in, have a chat with an expert, tell them your story, give them your circumstances. They'll know roughly what type of applications you might fit into. And a lot of the time what we find is people come into a consultation thinking, oh, this might be my avenue. They hadn't known about a different avenue, and suddenly there's a much simpler process for them to go through to, I suppose, regularise their status or advance their immigration permission or whatever they're looking for.
So if someone is a non-EU citizen or non-Irish citizen and they wanted to come work in Ireland and bring their family over here, what's the process there?
If someone is a non-EU citizen and wants to come over here, okay, so it really depends on the circumstances. But if you're a non-EU, more often than not, you'll be looking at a work permit to try and come over here. And there's two types of work permit. There's what's called a general work permit, and there is a critical skills work permit. Critical skills work permit it's kind of self-explanatory, but in a nutshell, it's people who are on the critical skills list. The Department of Justice will have put together a list online, which you can Google a list. You can type in critical skills work permits. There's a list of occupations that we are in a shortage on. Examples might be certain types of engineers, nurses. So what often happens is if there's a shortage, those people are sought after if they can't be found within the EU. Now, we don't typically get a lot of those applications because at the end of the day, if you're on the critical skills list and an employer wants you, there's a very high chance, subject to your qualifications, that you'll get over, and the employer will often be able to push it through. We've advised on a few, but the ones that we typically advise on are the general work permits, which are far more complicated. General work permit is more broad. The primary rule, if employers are watching, primary rule is if you want to know whether a person's occupation might be eligible for a work permit, Google the ineligible list as a starting point. So ineligible list of occupations for work permits. And you'll see on that list, there's a set list of what cannot be a work permit. Typical example might be bar staff, management of a catering facility. There's quite a long list. But if you're not on that list, you can get there. There's a few other criteria. Salary must be minimum of 30,000. 28, as low as 28,000 in exceptional cases, but generally minimum 30,000, cannot be on the ineligible list, and the person must show the qualifications, documentation necessary to be able to make the application. There's a further leg, which is called the labour market test, which is where a lot of our work is based, where the first thing that we do if somebody comes to us with a work permit application to bring someone over, or to facilitate a work permit application for somebody who's already here, which is another potential avenue. But what the first thing they have to do is to advertise it in the newspapers, 2 newspapers, also an advertisement online on a site that's called EURES, EURES. And once those ads have been put up and the duration of the ad has finished and nobody from the EU has successfully taken up the ad and been offered the job, then the employer can go about making the application through the Department of Jobs. So it is a fairly complex process. A lot of the time we find people come to us when they've tried to get the work permit over the line themselves, have failed on a technicality, and then they want to try a clean route through us. That's what we find, and it's certainly a growing area. I think with Brexit, and if the population keeps increasing, we'll see. But I think work permits are going to become more of a thing for sure.
And then, so that allows someone into the country.
Multinationals.
Yeah, that allows someone working with a country to visa.
Yeah.
There's different types of visa. You hear to be stamp 4. Well, what's the difference between them? Could you just explain in that process maybe?
The different stamps, what they are. So you can have stamp 1, you can have stamp 2, 3, 4, or you can have stamp 5, and you can even have stamp 0. So I could go through let's say if I go through 0 to 4, because stamp 5 is basically for the Chinese population, for them to keep their Chinese passport and have permanent residency here. So if I go through 0 to 4, zero is one of my favorites, because it's effectively for people. The applications are so interesting. It's for people who want to live here without working, without really engaging in any economic activity, but who simply want a flexible stamp to be able to come here. And they'll do it based generally on their own financial resources. We've experienced quite a number of people from the US who might have Irish heritage without having the Irish passport, and they want to simply retire here after they finish their career in the US. So what we do is we put forward their financials, their health records. It's quite a complicated process. We put it forward to the department. If the department are satisfied that those people can support themselves here, without the need to work or engage in any economic activity, they'll grant us what's called a stamp zero. That person can come in and out as they want. It's effectively, it's a nice mechanism for people who want to be able to drop in and out without the hassle of constantly applying for visas or overstaying their 3-month vacation period, as it might be. Stamp 1, we already touched on the work permits. And it's typically the stamp that you get for a work permit. So your residence card will say stamp 1, and it will also specify whether you need a work permit or not. Sometimes people do, sometimes people don't. It really depends on what the conditions are that have granted it. Stamp 2, in a general sense, is for students. Students who come into the country, they'll have to have applied for a recognised course before coming in. I'm sure you might have seen yourself, David, the number of people studying English here.
Yeah.
It's probably gone up over the years. There's a lot of English teaching schools, a huge amount of South Americans coming in. Yeah. Brazilians, Argentinians, Mexicans, they're coming in to learn English, which I suppose from their point of view it's probably a very worthwhile skill going forward. But it also opens up possibilities to them in Europe. They might be able to get a job here if they're sponsored. So stamp 2, you're allowed to work 20 hours per week as a student, but you also need to maintain your course of study. So a lot of people working in the catering industry, a lot of students, they might be those stamp 2 holders. They'll be working away their 20 hours and they'll be studying full time. Very busy people. Let's see, on to stamp 3. Stamp 3 is for dependents. So if a person has a stamp 3, they're effectively not allowed to work, but they are here with somebody who is allowed to work. Okay. And they're dependent on that person. It's not a fantastic stamp, but it's got one very positive side to it, is that it is covered by what is called reckonable residence. So if you have a stamp 3 for say 5 years, even if you haven't worked, you can still apply for Irish citizenship based on that stamp 3. So it is very good from that point of view, or a combination of 3, 4.
Just on the stamp 3 there, if you're obviously coming in as a dependent, if the person you've entered the country with, their stamp expires, does that stamp automatically expire then?
If you've come in with the person whose stamp automatically expires, they should dovetailing, I suppose. The period of time they should be dovetailing. It would all, I suppose it's a funny question. Yeah, it would. It generally would be around the same time period, I suppose. Yeah, because if you're dependent and otherwise, if you don't want it to expire, you'd have to make perhaps a change of status application. Okay. Because realistically, you couldn't be a dependent on somebody who's not. Yeah. Who doesn't have a permission to be here. Yeah. But you can certainly. What I find of people who are on stamp 3, it's a way that a lot of dependents come into the country. What we've done with a lot of people when they hold their stamp 3 and they want to work, we simply say to them, look, if you'd like to work, the first thing to do is, apply for jobs. If you get a job offer, bring us the job offer. We'll submit it to the department with an explanation, and we'll seek a variation of their status. What the Department of Justice, more often than not, if the circumstances are fair, they will grant that person a change from 3 to 4. And stamp 4 is effectively open market. You've open access to the labour market. Okay. Stamp 4 is in many ways for people who come into the country, it's the holy grail. Like if you can get a stamp 4, you really don't have any great limitations to the labour market. You're not obliged to stick to the one employer, which you would be under stamp 1, for example. As a work permit holder, you can move around. You can have the same rights as anyone really, Irish, other EU country. So it's a good one to get, and it's what people strive to get. And again, similar to stamp 3, it does count towards reckonable residence. So it does count towards your citizenship application. Okay.
That takes it on nicely. So if someone has entered into the country under work visas and then has settled here, their family is here, they like the country and the environment, the culture. If they wanted to become an Irish citizen, what's involved in that process?
Yeah, so once they've completed, so let's say they come in on a stamp 1 work permit, they do 4 years on stamp 1, they can apply then to change that to a stamp 4, which they often do. Once they've done the 1 year on the stamp 4, having done the 4 years on stamp 1, they're 5. You've done 5 years on your own merits. Now, this isn't if you're married to an Irish citizen, the rules are slightly different. But if you've done 5 years of residence on your own merits, on reckonable residence, so either a 1, a 3, or a 4, or a combination of those three. You can apply using what's called a Form 8 for Irish naturalisation. There's quite a number of documents. You're looking at the typical applications that we do. We generally have around 25 to 30 documents, sometimes 35, going with those applications. The main thing that a person has to show that they've been living here is residence, proof of residence. So you're looking at proofs of address, three proofs for every year that you're claiming on reckonable residence. There's further requirements such as you need to be of good character. If you are seen, for example, if you have shown yourself to have committed offences within the state or outside the state, there is a risk that they won't approve your application. What I say to people, if they are applying and they do have a misdemeanour on their record, it is important to disclose it. And for if you are to be hopeful of having a successful application, to address it as much as is possible. It's not impossible to be successful in a citizenship application if you do have a record of some nature, but you do have to show, for example, time has passed. Your evidence that your character is otherwise good. And in fairness to the Department of Justice, they have ultimate discretion. So if you put your case forward strong enough, they certainly have the discretion to grant it, and we've seen that quite a number of times.
And if there's someone in the country, a non-national, has come in by whatever means and is undocumented, is there avenues for that person to become official or to formalise their relationship with the state here?
Yeah, there is. I mean, a lot of, at the moment, if I look at it at the moment, the stats say that there is 60,000 or so people in Ireland who are undocumented. Wow. Which is quite a number. It doesn't seem to be broadcasted that much, but they say it's in around 60,000. A huge amount of people come over without a visa. We see quite a number of people. Not every country requires a visa to come here on holidays either. You see, that's the thing. There's a number of South American countries, for example, who don't require who don't need to apply for a visa to come on holidays. So they simply come in. A lot of people simply come in on a 90-day pass, same as we might do if we went to the States. For example, I'm sure you've been to the States. You might have walked in, you got a 90-day stamp on your passport, and it's effectively overstaying that. So, if somebody's undocumented, no, not into the world, it brings us back to, have a chat, have a consultation. We meet people constantly who are undocumented, and they might have an application available to them which they didn't know about, which is probably the most satisfying part of the work, because somebody comes, they didn't pick your application, you put it in front of them, you give them a list of documents, they get the documents. There's a bit of work there, but ultimately when they get it, it puts them on the right road. A lot of people come in by other means who, asylum, refugee status, international protection. That's a whole other area. I mean, if you come in and ultimately you come from a country whereby you might be eligible for international protection, and you're subsequently granted international protection, you will get recognised status here. If you are successful on that. That recognised status will give you a stamp 4, and 5 years on that stamp 4, you'll still get the citizenship. And you shouldn't. People aren't, from what I've seen, people aren't prejudiced really by the fact that they came in a manner which wasn't really in accordance with law. I would say it shouldn't really apply at that stage. It shouldn't, though it can. It's down to the discretion of the department. But our experience with the department, if you're very upfront and you're honest and ultimately if you're a good character, you should be in a position to show that. And if you do show it, they'll often give you the half of the ball.
Do you think that
which is great. It's important to have that leeway.
With the recent Brexit having come in recently, has that affected the Irish immigration process or anything to do with the immigration applications in Ireland? Yeah, it has. It's certainly added substantially to the number of people who are applying for Irish citizenship. It actually accounts for, last time of checking, it accounted for 1/3 of the citizenship applications, wow. which certainly wasn't close to that before. Now, that's a lot of people with Irish descent in the UK. So I suppose when Brexit happened, I suppose a lot of people put plans in place. They started applying a lot of the time from over in the UK. They started applying to go on the foreign births register based on maybe a grandparent
that kind of thing. So a lot, and so there is quite a number of applications. It's also where we've seen it as well. Like, people don't seem to have the same confidence, or whatever about coronavirus. Before the coronavirus, people didn't really seem to have the same confidence in the UK as what they had before the Brexit. And what we found is a lot of people, they wanted to come here. So the way to come here, if let's say one person had a UK passport in a family, but the rest of the family didn't have a UK passport, what people were doing was they were coming through Belfast, or coming into the north, let's say, coming down into the Republic. The person with the UK passport, as long as they work 12 hours per week minimum, we can then, or they can make that on their own behalf, or we can make it on their behalf. An application can be made under EU treaty rights to get the remaining family members legitimate stamp 4s or stamp 3s, as the case may be, for children. But we've seen those two areas probably. I mean, presumably there's more people coming in as well under work permits who might have gone to the UK. I think that's true as well, but it's hard to track that because there's so many. I mean, there's so many people coming in anyway, working for the multinationals, and it seems to be a thing that's really kept our economy going, I would say, for the last, I don't know how long. But the multinationals, especially in Cork, Dublin, they must account for a huge percentage of the workforce for sure. So I wonder, and I wonder about the students as well. I think if you're a student, you're Brazilian, Mexican, Argentinian, or otherwise, if you're looking to study somewhere, where do you go now? You know, you're looking at Europe. They might have gone to the UK before. Now they're probably reassessing and they're coming here. So that's potentially a reason why we have more of an influx in that.
And you just touched on something there earlier in relation to Irish ancestry. Could you just explain the process that someone might apply for citizenship or an application to move to Ireland or a passport under an ancestry rule?
Yeah, so in the UK, if you have a grandparent who was born, or a parent who was born on the island of Ireland, which includes the north, actually, if you have a parent who was born on the island of Ireland, you can apply to the Foreign Births Register to be put on the Foreign Births Register here as being an Irish national. And so that's slightly different to the citizenship application, because once you are in the Foreign Births Register, you'll be in a position to effectively go to the ceremony and take up your nationality.
So you don't necessarily have to.
It's something that a lot of people are taking up.
You don't necessarily have to live in the country.
Sorry, David, I didn't hear you there.
Sorry, Eoin. You don't necessarily have to live in the country.
No, you don't. Actually, no. Not for those people. No. And actually, the ancestry thing is it's taking up. It's accounting for a lot of Brazilian people who are coming here as well, which I find very interesting. Is that you have a lot of people coming here on student visas, but they'll know in advance, or they find out here that they might have ancestry in Europe, typically Spain, Italy, or Portugal.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, what's great for people with ancestry in Europe is they can come here, work away. They might to get their ancestry, for example, in Italy. I know they have to go down to Italy for 4 or 5 weeks or so, remain there for 4 or 5 weeks. But they can effectively come back into Ireland with an Italian passport.
Okay.
Once they do that and they're working here, they're engaging their EU treaty rights by having a non-Irish European passport but working in Ireland. If they're married, have children, if they're in a cohabiting relationship in excess of 2 years, those people who are in that legal relationship with them, they can then benefit by the fact that person is an EU worker. So there's a huge amount of chains there, and there's a huge amount of options. And to be fair, there seems to be a huge link between those countries and Brazil. So you'd see probably one in every few seem to have that option available. Yeah, sure.
Oh, listen, thank you very much for your time. That's been really interesting, really informative here today. Just one last one. What's the plans for Joyce Solicitors into the future?
We'll have to play it by month at the moment.
Yeah.
What I say there, David, I'm not sure what your thinking of these things is, but I try and just plan for 12 months.
Sure.
I think it's, in this day and age, hard to look beyond 12 months because, things change. You have to adjust to the goalposts. You can't just You can't just plan too long term, because the goalposts, as we've seen, can change fairly quickly.
Sure.
So definitely, I've planned in place for 12 months, but we'll certainly try and keep our progress going here in Cork and Limerick as well.
Yeah.
And we'll see in the future, yeah.
And if there's anyone out there maybe like doing their leaving cert or heading into college and interested in a career in law, what advice would you give them? Would you recommend it? Do you enjoy it?
Oh yeah, look, I really enjoy it, yeah. I think it's a very worthwhile career, very enjoyable. It's probably not for everyone. I mean, I certainly would recommend it but I think in the solicitor side of things, I think it's almost a combination of having that liking law, I suppose, but also liking business.
Yeah.
You have to like the two, because they go hand in hand. If a person is more academically focused and they don't like the business element, and they prefer to analyse text only, maybe the barrister route might be more for them, possibly. In terms of if you are to go our route, like myself and yourself, David, I mean, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but like in terms of training, if you want to go down a training route, I'd be looking at a small firm regardless. I just from talking to people, looking at how people develop, a small firm just gives you that bit more exposure to different areas. You're a bit more hands-on, you're client-facing, you're put under that bit more pressure to adjust all the time. Big firm, it just seems from talking to colleagues and that you're effectively, you're a cog. You might be doing duties like copying. You might not be client-facing so much, obviously depending on the firm. But if I was giving advice to anyone in the morning, I'd say train in a small firm and qualify in a small firm, and then see what you want to do, because I think you'll be in a much better spot.
Well, Eoin, I think that's great advice. Can I just say thank you once again for your time today?
If they want to go on. Oh, pleasure, David. Great to see you.
Yeah,
I
listen.
In a few weeks with the virus, and look, I will catch up. I'm sure we'll catch up for coffee in a couple of weeks when we get the chance.
I'm sure we will. Listen, Eoin, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. We wish you all the very best into the future. Thank you.
Same to you, David. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on the show.